In the heart of Washington, D.C., the federal courthouse stood as a fortress of justice, its marble walls echoing with the weight of history. On a bone-chilling morning in 2025, the courtroom was a pressure cooker of anticipation. Every seat was filled, the air thick with the murmurs of reporters, the click of camera shutters, and the tense whispers of onlookers. They weren't here for an ordinary trial. They were witnessing the public reckoning of Kash Patel, a former FBI director whose name had once been synonymous with an unrelenting pursuit of truth. Now, he sat at the defendant's table, accused of crimes that could shatter his legacy and burden him with a $500 million fine. Patel, in a simple gray suit, sat upright, his hands clasped, his gaze locked on the judge's bench. His presence was magnetic, commanding every eye despite the weight of the accusations. Across the courtroom, Judge Robert Marshall emerged through heavy double doors, his black robe trailing to his ankles, his steps deliberate. His eyes, sharp as a blade, scanned the room without warmth. He carried the authority of the U.S. legal system, a shadow of power that silenced the crowd as he took his seat. Adjusting his glasses, he raised his gavel, and the room held its breath. The gavel struck, a sound like thunder in a clear sky. Marshall declared, his voice cold and measured, "The severity of the violation is grave, the damage extensive. Therefore, the court imposes a civil penalty of $500 million, to be paid within 90 days. The room erupted in gasps. Reporters scribbled furiously, their pens racing to capture a moment destined for history books. The sum was staggering, larger than the GDP of some small nations. Camera flashes lit up like a lightning storm, illuminating the stunned faces of onlookers. Even the court stenographer paused, her fingers hovering over the keys. But Kash Patel didn't flinch. He sat still as stone, his face betraying no emotion, only the steady rise and fall of his chest, hinting at the burden he carried. He glanced briefly at his attorney, Sarah Langston, giving a slight nod, not of defeat, but of resolve. His eyes seemed to say, "This isn't over." In that moment, Patel's mind drifted to a memory from his early days as a Justice Department lawyer. He recalled a mentor's advice: "Truth is a fire. Let it burn, even if it scorches you." That fire had guided him through cases others avoided, battles against government corruption and intelligence agency abuses. He had entered this courtroom not as a fallen hero, but as a man tempered by those flames, ready to face whatever came next. Judge Marshall struck the gavel again, calling for a recess. The echo lingered, but the story had escaped the courtroom's walls. Headlines were drafted before the trial began. Conservative star exposed for abuse of power. Patel's downfall. To the public, it seemed a hero had fallen, or so they thought. The media swarmed like vultures, each outlet hunting for the most sensational angle. Commentators predicted the end of Patel's political career, whispering poison in the corridors. He's done. Arrogant, corrupt like the rest. But they didn't know Kash Patel. Before he was FBI director, Patel had been a Justice Department lawyer, a man who built his reputation not on wealth or connections, but on resilience and truth. He took on cases others shied away from: government corruption, intelligence agency abuses, and conspiracies buried by the powerful. Early in his career, he rushed to a televised legal debate after his car ran out of gas 2 blocks from the studio. With only 30 seconds to spare, he arrived, composed, and outshone his opponents with a steely intellect that earned him the nickname Storm in a Suit. He chuckled at the phrase, but it haunted him, a reminder of the battles he'd chosen. As FBI Director, he didn't seek the role through elite networks, but earned it by refusing to be sidelined. He quoted Ronald Reagan before hostile committees, kept a memo about the deep state on his desk, and entered every fight ready to lose everything except his honor. The courtroom believed the $500 million fine would crush him. They were wrong. Across the aisle, the federal prosecutor, Michael Stone, stood with a polished suit and a smug smile, his voice carrying the weight of gospel. To the public, Stone was the hero, the one who would topple another corrupt official. His theatrics were calculated, his confidence unshakable. But he didn't know Patel wasn't prey. The system had a playbook: target a tough conservative figure, smear their reputation, and watch the crowd cheer their fall. They had perfected it over decades. This time, they chose the wrong man. As the courtroom processed the fine, Patel leaned toward Sarah Langston and whispered, "Show them what they don't want to see." His voice was calm, almost casual, like he was commenting on the weather. The microphone near the defendant's table barely caught the words. Sarah didn't blink or smile. Instead, she reached under the table and pulled out a thick, worn manila envelope. Every eye followed her as she stood, smoothing her jacket with deliberate calm. The moment felt cinematic, like a magician preparing the final act after convincing the audience the show was over. Reporters stopped typing mid-sentence. Pens hovered in the air. Even Judge Marshall, his face carved from stone, leaned forward slightly, one eyebrow raised in curiosity. Sarah approached the bench, placing the envelope gently before Marshall. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady, "before any penalty is enforced, the defense respectfully requests permission to present new evidence. Evidence we believe will fundamentally alter the basis of this case." Marshall's eyes narrowed, his skepticism honed by years on the bench. "Ms. Langston, the time for presenting evidence has passed. The court has ruled. What could justify this interruption?" Sarah's response was sharp and clear. "Because, Your Honor, this evidence was deliberately withheld from us. We received it 3 days ago from a whistleblower within the Justice Department." The words shattered the air. Gasps echoed like startled birds. Reporters stood instinctively, their notebooks forgotten. Michael Stone whipped his head around, his smug smile vanishing like wax from a dying candle. Marshall studied Sarah, searching for signs of exaggeration or scheming. Finding none, he opened the envelope. Inside was a stack of documents, clear and damning. The first page was a memo from the Justice Department's internal audit team, drafted months before charges were filed against Patel. It concluded that irregularities in the Executive Transparency Program stemmed from a third-party data contractor's software glitches, not fraud or misconduct by Patel. The next page revealed internal emails, one stating, "We reviewed the audit." There's no clear evidence Patel intentionally misled anyone. Pursuing this case could trigger political backlash. Another email urged delaying the release of the findings for optics. The courtroom froze. Clerks stood motionless. The silence was deafening, the kind that marks a historic shift. Marshall's hands gripped the documents tightly, his composure unraveling. He flipped page after page, reading faster, his lips pressed into a thin line. These weren't allegations. They were authenticated, signed, dated exchanges, undeniable proof that the Justice Department had hidden the truth. They had targeted Patel, a thorn in the side of the powerful, to silence him. Sarah stepped back, letting the evidence speak. Stone looked like he might disintegrate, his colleagues staring blankly as their case collapsed. Patel sat still, his gaze unwavering. For the first time that morning, he wasn't on trial. The system was. Marshall's breath hitched, a crack in his granite-like calm. His eyes betrayed moral disgust as he closed the documents. He looked out at the courtroom, no longer an aloof judge, but a man confronting a system that had betrayed his trust. "Mr. Stone," he said, his voice low but laced with anger, "do you have anything to add?" Stone opened his mouth, then closed it, his voice failing him. His notes slipped to the floor as he fumbled, his red silk tie twisting as if it wanted to flee. A reporter coughed to cover a laugh. Marshall straightened, his voice carrying finality. Upon review of the documents submitted by the defense, this court finds credible and material evidence that exculpatory information was deliberately withheld, in gross violation of federal disclosure obligations. This undermines the defendant's rights and insults the integrity of this court. He paused, letting the weight settle. Therefore, the $500 million penalty imposed on Director Kash Patel is vacated, effective immediately. The room erupted. Gasps rippled through the press section. A pen clattered to the floor. Someone whispered, "What did he just say?" Patel closed his eyes, not in triumph but in solemn acknowledgement of the truth's victory. Marshall continued, his voice razor-edged. "This trial is not over. What we've witnessed raises questions about the system itself." Patel opened his eyes, meeting the judge's stare. In that fleeting moment, two men who believed in justice shared a silent understanding. Patel wasn't just fighting for his name, he was putting the system on trial. As the courtroom emptied, Patel sat quietly, his thoughts turning inward. He remembered the countless nights spent poring over case files, the faces of those he'd fought for, whistleblowers, agents, ordinary citizens silenced by power. This wasn't just his victory. It was theirs. Outside, the public's reaction was electric. Social media exploded with hashtags like #Justice for Patel, and ordinary Americans, from small-town diners to urban apartments, debated the case. For many, Patel's exoneration was a rare glimpse of hope in a system they'd long distrusted. The next morning, outside Congress, a press conference room brimmed with reporters, cameras, and a tense air usually reserved for wartime briefings. Patel stepped to a simple podium, flanked only by an American flag and a nameplate. No banners, no hired crowd, just him and the truth. "I know what you came to hear," he said, his voice calm but sharp. "You want anger, gloating, a victory lap? I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for reform." The room fell silent. "I stand here as proof that our justice system, unchecked, can be manipulated by political motive. But this doesn't have to end with me. It can start something bigger." He outlined a bold plan: mandatory transparency laws to prevent buried evidence, protections for whistleblowers, and a bipartisan judicial review board to hold prosecutors and agencies accountable. His words were conversational but carried undeniable force. He spoke of the whistleblower who risked everything to deliver the truth, their name unspoken but honored. This wasn't about fixing his image. It was about preventing future victims. The room erupted in applause, slow at first, then thunderous. Reporters, aides, Even skeptics stood, moved by the truth. Patel's final words lingered. Justice shouldn't depend on how loud your voice is or how deep your pockets are. It should depend on the truth. Period. The fallout was swift. Within 72 hours, senior Justice Department officials were suspended. Headlines exploded. Justice Department slammed for hiding evidence. Whistleblower rocks government. A leaked Zoom clip went viral, showing a Justice Department attorney admitting, "We had to go after him. If we don't push this narrative, Patel will be too strong by the midterms." The clip garnered 18 million views, fueling public outrage. The House Oversight Committee launched hearings, and the Inspector General opened a criminal investigation. For the first time, the untouchable seemed vulnerable. Across the nation, people gathered in coffee shops and community halls, discussing not just Patel's case, but their own experiences with a system that often seemed to serve power over justice. Judge Marshall, known for his stoicism, broke his silence at a legal conference at George Washington University. What began as a lecture on constitutional law became a reflection on the Patel case. "The law is not a shield for the powerful," he said, his voice trembling. "It must protect the people." He paused, removing his glasses, a tear escaping. "I've issued rulings for decades, but this time I had to stand with the truth." His words spread across law journals, and the Patel case became a cornerstone in judicial ethics studies, taught in classrooms as a lesson in accountability. Patel didn't bask in the spotlight. He returned to work, visiting FBI offices, community centers, and veterans' halls. At a small veteran support center, an elderly woman shared her son's struggle for benefits, abandoned by the system. Through tears, she whispered, "I stopped believing in the government, but I believe in you." Patel swallowed hard, nodding. His legacy wasn't built in boardrooms, but among those who'd lost faith. He listened to their stories, from veterans to small-town families, each one a reminder of why he fought. The question lingered. If this could happen to an FBI director with resources and attention, what chance did the voiceless have? That question drove Patel's mission. His exoneration led to the Executive Transparency Act, passed with bipartisan support, mandating transparency in federal investigations and creating an oversight board. The law honored the truth, not the scandal. It sparked conversations in homes and schools, where people began to demand more from their institutions. Patel continued his work, not as an icon, but as a catalyst. He met with law enforcement, veterans, and communities, listening to their stories. At a fundraiser, he tripped before a speech, papers flying. Instead of panicking, he grinned, dusted off his suit, and said, "Sometimes justice looks like this, falling flat in front of the world." The crowd laughed, and his speech shifted bipartisan views on his reform bill. The moment went viral, not for drama, but for authenticity. Months later, a phrase from a handwritten note Patel left for a high school civics class spread nationwide. "When the powerful tremble because the truth stands tall, that's when justice begins." It appeared on murals, coffee mugs, and in classrooms, capturing his journey. Not rage, not revenge, but truth, unyielding and demanding to be heard. Patel's story reflects the tensions of 2025 America: distrust in institutions, polarized politics, and the battle for truth. His journey from a $500 million fine to exposing a Justice Department conspiracy shows the power of resolve against political pressure. His connection with ordinary people, from veterans to small town halls, underscores that change starts by listening, not chasing glory. In a world where power distorts truth, Patel's lesson is clear. One voice, rooted in honesty, can challenge an empire of lies. His story isn't just about winning a case, it's about inspiring a movement for justice, reminding us that truth, spoken with courage, can move history.